Welcome to Acton Line, a product of the Acton Institute promoting a free and virtuous society. I'm Mark Townsend, producer. You can find additional resources in the show notes for this episode, as well as previous episodes of Acton Line at acton.org/podcasts. If you have a comment or an idea for a future episode, you can email us at podcast@acton.org. Acton Line is available to stream on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and acton.org.
Welcome. My name is Dan Huger, librarian and research associate. And with me today on Acton Line is Dan Churchwell. Dan is our Director of Programs and Education here at the Acton Institute. Today we're going to be talking about Acton University, which at the time this airs is going to be next week. So we're a little further out than that, but most of the details are hammered out. I's are being dotted and T's are being crossed, as always, up to go time. But I thought I'd take an opportunity to sit down with Dan and just talk a little bit about Acton University and sort of its history, its place in sort of the orbit of Acton things. It's kind of our flagship thing. It's our flagship conference. Talk a little bit about that. So this is a 20th anniversary, which is also like a very momentous thing. So Dan, what is a little bit of the background of Acton University and what is its role in what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Acton University is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. We're really excited. Acton Institute is 35 years old, so this came about 15 years after we were doing a lot of other different kinds of programming. And as many people know, we do a lot of conferences and events all around the country, around the world. And so the traveling got a little crazy in the early days, and they said, what if we could bring everybody to Grand Rapids? Instead of all these conferences all over, we could bring people here. And so that was just the baby steps towards what was called Acton Symposium, and bringing a few hundred people to Grand Rapids. And that quickly morphed into something we call now Acton University. We're celebrating 20 years. We're going to have a lot of really great facts running on the boards during the week, and just really celebrating what 20 years looks like in our flagship conference.
I have been at Acton since 2008, and my very first Acton University was the very last Acton University we did on the other side of the river,
right,
at the Eberhard Center, which is a great facility that Grand Valley State University has. My cousin had his wedding reception there. It's beautiful. Sure. It's by the river, but we kind of grew out of it. Yeah. And we have been at DeVos Place just across the river, which is also a beautiful venue ever since. This is a big venue because it's a big conference. What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Yeah, this is great. I mean, when we've dug into a lot of the stats, it's 65,000 square feet. And so we fill it up. And we really have a great opportunity to have roughly 1,000 people this year from 82 foreign countries come and participate. Over the history, I think it was 2011 where we first surpassed 500, and then 2015 we surpassed 1,000, and so we've been consistently right at that 1,000 member attendee mark for 10 years now. Yeah. And nearly 22,000 people total unique visitors have come to Acton University, and so yes, definitely we had to move it to the DeVos Place, and we fill up virtually every square foot of that for 4 days. So it's really a lot of fun to see all of the diverse groups of people. Like I said, 1,000 people from 82 foreign countries, and a mix of entrepreneurs and pastors, graduate students, high-functioning undergrad students, nonprofit leaders. I mean, it is just a really interdisciplinary mix of people who choose to come to this.
It's an eclectic mix.
Yes.
And there's a way we cater to that eclecticism, but before we get there, I want to talk about what's common with the AU experience.
Sure.
We have a sort of core series of lectures that folks who come to Acton University for the first time all attend. Could you tell us a little bit about those core lectures and what we try to accomplish with having everyone who come from an amazing variety of backgrounds? What's the goal bringing them through this core together?
Yeah, I think fundamentally you want to think about defining your terms for any kind of intellectual pursuit, right? And a core lecture series, like any university or any church or religion, whatever our core beliefs, what are we looking at to get across? And we have 4 core lectures, and anybody to be considered an alum has to have these 4 lectures in their back pocket.
Yep.
And we have over 15,000 alumni around the world in different facets that have gone through the complete program. And the first one is anthropology. What does it mean to be a human person? Made in the image of God, and how does that affect how we think about our vocations, how we think about our work, how relation to one another, and so that human anthropology is really what sets us apart from a lot of other think tanks. It's really one of our differentiators. We really believe that the core understanding of what it means to be human really then animates everything else that we do. The second lecture is a general lecture on natural law, introducing people. A lot of people haven't had a very intense engagement. They natural theology, or they come at it in a few different ways, but we try to bring some common language to what do we mean by natural law? What do we mean about something that's written on the heart that we can all kind of ascribe to in understanding systems like justice, et cetera, in other ways. So we have anthropology, we have natural law, and then the economic way of thinking. And there's a lecture on kind of Econ 101.
Yeah.
What does it mean taking, anthropology and natural law in its foundation and then thinking about that lens with the discipline of economics? And we've had 1 or 2 lecturers kind of carry the whole 20 years. I mean, they do phenomenal work. And so the economic way of thinking, then that leads right into kind of the political way of thinking or engaging. What does it mean to be, as Aristotle called, a political man or woman? How do we interact with the polis? And so those 4 ideas of what it means to be human, how natural law interacts, how we then interact economically and politically, those are our core fundamental ideas that we want to bring a common language, common parlance out to our group. And then there they go to the different electives. I mean, we have over 80 lectures. We have 60 lecturers coming this year and 81 lectures to choose from. And so it covers the gamut, theology, philosophy, economics, entrepreneurship, business leadership. And there's a really wide range, but we want them all to come through the gate of the core lectures.
Yeah. So you're going to get more elaborations on the theory. You're going to get practitioners talking about how they bring the sort of knowledge we talk about in the core curriculum into their vocations in social service, in business, in politics, in all of these avenues of life. Now, there's also, with this conference, there are these individual sessions. There are the core sessions, but then we have these plenary sessions in the evening. These are where we bring everybody together. Everybody goes through the day going through either core lectures or these elective lectures, and then at the end of the day, we all come together for these plenary speakers. What does that look like this year? Maybe before that, we talk a little bit about what you set out to accomplish in planning these plenary sessions, because this is one, the core is kind of what we think everybody should know to come together, to have these sort of conversations together. The electives are kind of like people taking that knowledge, spinning off in their own, particular interests, and then we're bringing people back together in the evenings with these plenaries. Absolutely. And what are we looking at with there? What's the takeaway we're looking at for those plenary sessions?
Yeah, plenary sessions, we're the entire 1,000+ group, because we sell dinner tickets. So some people from the community can't take the 4 days off, or they can only take a day, et cetera. So we have a lot of people from the community. They drive from as far away as Detroit and Chicago. They come up for some of our special evening events. So we'll have 1,000+ at dinner each night. And we really tried to think about the 20th anniversary as focus. So, for example, the first night we have Matt Hangen, the president of a company called Water 4, which is a for-profit well drilling company, and that really services the underdeveloped world in finding services for clean water.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nonprofits. But Matt Hangen, when he came to Acton University, he kind of understood the way of thinking about economics in a way that you can still serve people and give people buy-in, but then build a company around that culturally that then has a stronger return on investment, both for the local village, the people there, and his company. And so he has a really unique story of taking Acton's principles and building out a company, a very successful one, and useful one. And then the next night we have Arthur Brooks. And Arthur Brooks, the New York Times bestselling author, Harvard professor now, New York Times columnist, he's coming to talk and engage. He's been a friend of Acton for decades.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's going to come and give a great talk, a plenary talk to the 1,000. And then the third night is Heather Templeton Dill. And so the Templeton Foundation has been a major part of what we do here at Acton. And she and her family and the Institute have really collaborated on some fantastic programming that really has a direct impact on the strength of communities around the world. And so she's going to share a little bit about her vision and her connections to Acton. And then we have Frank Hanna for the last night, who's been a board member for years and runs a very successful financial company. And he's just going to share a little bit about the formation that he's received and built and helped develop at Acton over the 20 years. So I think it's just showing kind of a continuity, a different kind of way of thinking about Acton to celebrate those 20 years of just, like you said, interdisciplinary work.
I love it because you've got speakers from a more academic angle there.
Yeah.
You've got speakers from a more practical angle, innovators in their own fields, and it's a really great, well-rounded lineup of speakers. And it's I think maybe the toughest thing to do at Acton University is to be a plenary speaker because you have an audience from around the world. You have an audience that didn't select in. It's at the end of a very rigorous day. Everybody eats dinner at these plenary sessions, and I think you've done a great job of getting together a lineup of engaging speakers that can really bring something special to the event.
Well, thank you. And I just we really develop, with the speakers, we try to have multiple calls and context for them to show them that exactly, the most common phrase is drinking from a fire hose. There's so much intellectual firepower and books and quotes, and they're just so full of that the evenings are usually more narrative, more story, 30 minutes of just, look, this is what we've done, very, a little more laid back, if you will, in that sense, where they are introducing us to their story, and so you can listen in a way that's a little different, but it's definitely built around and cultivated to be a more, the experience is going to be very, very enjoyable. There's good food, there's good wine. It's built to have a kind of a letdown from the day of intensity and just enjoy and see what some of the content that has transpired over the last 20 years.
Yeah. So longtime listeners to this program will be probably most familiar with these sessions because we often run these sessions as episodes of this program.
Right.
And we'll probably be doing so again this year. It's a great listening experience. When you said listening, it just triggered they'll be listening.
Oh yeah.
Even if they don't make it this year, this plenary program will make available to you as we usually do. Now, you mentioned the unwinding portion of the evening. This is not where the evening ends, is with the plenary. Then we have hospitality, and we have an opportunity for networking. We could talk a little bit about those discrete hospitality events after the plenary, but also the whole week is an opportunity for networking, to getting to know people who share similar interests, involved in similar fields, who come with similar questions and similar challenges that they're coming to Acton U to hopefully get some insight into. What's your experience been with the networking, both in sort of tailoring the conference to make that a very real thing for the folks that attend, and what is the sort of networking you've seen, and what sort of fruit is it borne in this AU experience?
So this month I'm starting my 10th year at Acton. So I'm starting my first decade here, and but before this I was a professor. Before that I worked in for-profit business, and I've been to about every kind of conference, and to see the value and the hospitality and the culture built around Acton University that, again, was going 10 years before I got here, and hopefully will go 10 years beyond, right? And the networking and hospitality are just very unique elements. We ask all of our speakers, and virtually over 90% of them are able to do this with their schedules, stay for the entire conference. So in other words, sometimes speakers fly in, fly out, one and done kind of thing, and that varies from speaker to speaker, but the vast majority of our speakers come, and so you have the opportunity to have a meal with them, to meet them in the hallway. We have a 45-minute lecture, but then 30 minutes of full Q&A at every session. So, the really interesting, a lot of it, you can curate a 45-minute lecture, but 30 minutes of Q&A, you can really tell how your lecture lands. And here, people kind of cultivate that. And then on the networking side, you're meeting the speakers, but you're also meeting people from all around the world, and some that don't think exactly like you do, and some that come from different contexts, economically, religiously. We have 66 religions and denominations represented, 66 for this year. And so that networking, you can see organizations, and these are part of some of the slides we'll be showing, some of the impact over the last 20 years. People who have met at Acton have gone on to create universities, have gone on to create businesses, have changed jobs, have added our curriculum into their curriculum as professors. I mean, the list goes on, and really helping to curate those organic. I'll use that word. It's organic. We try to actually hands off. We don't try to hyper plan those hospitality hours so that people then can meet over meals and have. I mean, there's meetings that people meet up and they're like, hey, let's all get together for lunch. And they take one of the tables, and then all of a sudden something's cooking, and then they have ideas, and we have thousands of stories like that. And so that's what networking is, and the hospitality is a fundamental part of our culture.
And it's a great way. I mean, you bring out from the way that lunches are laid out, where you can enter these spontaneous groups. The way that, we're right on the river there. There's a great outside area where people can mix. There is also, when you bring up Q&A, I think of how many conversations I've had over the years attending a lecture, someone else's lecture, hearing a great question, and then meeting and following up with that person who asked that question.
Oh, absolutely.
That might share interests or similar questions, or brings up, something really interesting that I want to dig more into, where it's not just, you're not just there for the speakers, you're there for each other. In a really foundational way.
And that's what's really great. We have about 60% new and 40% returning, because obviously I just listed, we have 60 faculty members, 80 sessions. Well, you can't go to 80 sessions. You can only go to 12. And so we have a lot of repeat customers that want to come back 2 or 3 years in a row to get the full experience. So you have some of these returning cohorts, but a mix of new people. And so the opportunity to meet new people and see what's going on. And listen, I think a lot of the fun for me is I just ask a lot of questions. I get to hear what's going on in the spheres that we're interested in around the world. And so it's really a great opportunity, anecdotally, to see some of the work that's been doing for the cause of virtue and freedom around the world.
One of the things we haven't talked about yet, but that is always a part of the conference, but in different ways every year, are like sort of special events. So we build in some space in the schedule where if you just need a break, you can take a break. You can. Is it the third day or the second day?
Third day. The first session after lunch in the afternoon. There's kind of like almost a 3-hour block total. Where you can just walk along the river or do whatever you wish.
If you have a great conversation and want to follow up with somebody there in a more detailed manner, that's a great time to do it. If you want to take a walk, if you want to relax, but we also have some programming options during those. What sort of events have we had in the past, and are there any this year that like kind of jump out at you?
Oh yeah, all kinds. So this is a lot of times where we like to do panels.
Yeah.
So we'll try to curate a few panels that people might be interested in. Last year we had a MMA fighter do one. Famously, Father Sirico interviewed him. And so from panels to one-offs to showings, like documentary showings. Yeah. This year we're going to have, it's the 10th anniversary of our fabulously successful documentary Poverty, Inc. Mm-hmm. And so Poverty, Inc., we're going to do a 10-year retrospective showing one of the evenings. And we're also in post-production on our brand new poverty documentary about poverty in America. And so we're going to show a trailer for that and talk a little bit. Participants will be able to hear more about what's moving forward with our Center for Social Flourishing that's engaging that new documentary. And so we try to fill it with just very unique kinds of things. Allow people to go take a walk or a nap, if they need it, or catch up on emails. Hopefully not, hopefully they can really engage. Yeah. But then we fill it, we'll have a panel on higher education, some conversations there from really two presidents that are doing some interesting work in higher ed, a very difficult field, and just all kinds of things that help fill that void for some of the other narrow programming that we do.
Yeah. We're going to be doing a live podcast recording for Acton Line there,
great.
With a panel with Thomas Howes and James Patterson.
Oh, sure.
Going to be doing a book on post-liberalism.
Post-liberalism.
And they are in the midst of writing that. I'm in the midst of editing that, and that should be a really fun conversation for folks. What are you looking most forward to this year? There's a lot of work, a lot of planning that you and the whole programs department do all year to make this happen. So there's a sense in which that I'm sure that the thing you're looking most forward to is, after a successful AU, those waves of relief washing over you. But there's also, like, you're always trying new things and introducing new things into the mix that are exciting. What is the thing this year that you're really looking forward to in this 20th anniversary year?
Yeah, I don't know if that's changed. And like you said, I would be remiss. I mean, I appreciate you saying, you've done this, but the team, we have such an amazing team at Acton. You know that, right? Absolutely. And the programs and education team, yes, they bear the bulk of the admin work, et cetera, and some of the programming, but it's a team effort. The entire institute comes together for our meeting. And literally, it is an 11-month project. Yeah. We take a reporting starts immediately in July. We take a little breather in August. But by September, stuff's already running for next year. And so I think, I have such the pleasure of working with a wonderful team. Mm-hmm. And what I'm looking forward to each year, for me personally, it's the same. It's biography. Mm-hmm. I probably see every single application, and we get several thousand applications a year for these different positions, opportunities. And so having the opportunity to then meet the people, because there's a certain kind of knowledge you can get from a paper app or a digital application, right? You just read what they say.
Yeah.
But then when you meet the people in the flesh, you begin to talk, you begin to see what animates them, what about our curriculum is interesting, what drew them. I mean, we have people coming from as far away as Australia, 11,000 miles to come to this, South Africa, all over the world, literally. I mean, we've had 155 countries represented total over our 20 years. And so, this year about roughly 80 countries. And so I just ask a lot of questions. I want to know what is going on around the world. And it's just like we already talked about, walking through the hallways, we have over 20 volunteers coming to help. We have 20 emerging leaders, our internship program. We have really high-functioning emerging leaders. So getting to see how everybody mingles and gets to learn and listen, that is just absolute joy to be a part of.
I absolutely love, and this is what I've done the past couple of years, but most of I have one lecture, but the rest of my time is going to be dedicated to this podcast, to recording interviews. Yeah. And last year, I'll never forget, we had things scheduled, and then all of a sudden, there was a cardinal who wanted to be interviewed.
Oh, yeah.
And he had worked for years and years on interfaith relations, at the Vatican. He was from India. It was a wonderful conversation. And this was something that literally I didn't plan it. It just happened.
Right.
Because people were the amazing variety of people that come from all over the world to Acton University. And I always look forward to those. I look forward to the questions, the conversations ahead of time, but I also look forward to those surprises. Those surprises are so much fun.
Yeah, serendipity might be too soft of a word, but there really are those opportunities that really do happen every year, every single year that we couldn't plan to save our lives.
So one of those, I just shared a little story. You've been doing this for a very long time in the programs department, and you've seen a lot, and a lot has happened. What are some of the stories? I guess you have stories of things that tremendous successes, inspirational things, near misses. I'll never forget. One year we had Andy Crouch, who was then editor of Christianity Today magazine, scheduled to be a plenary speaker, and I remember him notifying us that he was very, very ill and might not be able to make it. And everybody was sort of terrified. You always have contingency plans because this is the sort of thing that can happen at any time. And he made the flight. He decided he was well enough to speak. And I was expecting a very sick man.
Sure.
He gave an amazing standout plenary presentation. I would never have known that he was ill. And that was something that behind the scenes I got to see, and I got to see a speaker really rise to the occasion, really deliver a fantastic experience for everybody in the audience. And to do so under difficult circumstances. Are there any story? I mean, that's one story that I have, and I am not as intimately involved in every aspect of this as you are. You must have seen, dozens of those sorts of stories. Is there any that sort of stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and you're right. Contingencies are, you're trying to plan something like this. People underestimate the work that goes into it on the back end. But no, it is literally curating the opportunities for people to flourish in their gift. So having people come and lecture, both plenary talks, having and our basic lectures where people can choose. I think finding, for me, the stories, the ones, unfortunately, as with life, right? The things that stick out are the negatives, or the things that could have gone bad. And was Andy Crouch, when was that 14 or 15? Was that 24?
That sounds about right.
I'm trying to remember the last time we had him here. Yeah, and because I was there for that one, but I was a professor. And so that was actually my first AU as outside observer.
Oh,
and
that's great.
Yeah. And so I remember that for sure. But we've had, I think there's been a lot of times, and like I said already, engaging, especially the Q&A in the plenary session, having the master of ceremonies, the MC during the plenaries. We then sit down, we kind of have a little living room set, and then they sit down, and then they are able to unpack some of the talk, and then we take questions from the audience.
Yeah.
And getting somebody in a little bit, a lot of those people have given those lectures 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, depending on who they are. But then hearing what our audience hears, hearing how it lands, and then getting to unpack that with somebody for 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. There's a lot. What I love is then in those conversations, especially the MC, they do a really good job of pulling out of them further context. Yeah. Or, hey, you said this quote, or hey, you use this example. Can you tell us more about it? It's the ability to have conversation. And I think that I honestly think for me that's what we curate. We curate really deep and breadth of conversation for 4 days that many people in their everyday lives don't have access to.
So this is something that I always try to describe to people, because there are a lot of lectures that anybody can find online. You can go, MIT's got all their lectures up there. Harvard's got a lot of lectures out there. There's a lot of lectures that we put out there on our YouTube channel. Yeah. But I think that conversational experience and how much of the time is set aside for that in these individual breakout sessions and the plenaries. And you do get something beyond the speech.
Right.
You get something, and when you've got people that have gone through this shared experience of the core, there are certain things that they're going to draw out, certain questions that they're naturally going to have that, speakers might not address those sorts of questions because they're not always addressing that sort of audience.
Right.
But it's a very unique audience at Acton University that's also, that's also formed in distinctive ways through their AU experience that can give, that sort of feedback. And it is always sort of like, that's always the surprise. It's a surprise each and every time.
Absolutely. And that curating the opportunity or the ecosystem for that to happen, I think we can do pretty well, but then you just have to let it then you let the conversations happen. And, Marshall McLuhan, the 70s, media theorist, was famous, for medium is the message. And the medium of an in-person conference, in the flesh, having conversations with somebody. Sure, you can ingest a lecture on YouTube. There's something absolutely different, not only with having access to that speaker, but the other people who experienced it with you, the 50, 60, 70 people in the room. You can lean over and ask a question. You can then follow on with, hallway conversations or grab a drink after one of the talks and extend the conversation. And I really think there's something about the ecosystem of the in-person conference that is still magical, that it still has the opportunity to cultivate those opportunities to really have an organic opportunity to talk.
There's something every single session, and I didn't even think about this until you just articulated this. Every single session I've walked out of, every single plenary I've walked out of, my first question to the first person I speak to every time is, what did you think of that?
Yeah.
Which brings a whole other, I heard it, they heard it, but I want to hear what this other person who heard it with me heard, what they took away from it, what they thought of it, what their thoughts on the themes addressed by the lecturer are. And it is really, it's an open invitation to that sort of thing. And I'm not unique there. I like to think of myself as a curious guy, but this is nobody's ever startled when I ask them this. They return with the same sort of query as to what I thought. And that's what everybody's doing at this conference, which is really special.
And you know what else, Dan, that we find is that the vast majority of people, I don't know how many, you and I have gone to a lot of conferences in our day. A lot of people go to professional conferences and they end up taking in one or two of the sessions and then they go hang out.
Yeah.
Or they grab drinks or they leave. I think it's not an exaggeration to say 98% of the people who say, I'm going to be in this session and do this, they actually show up.
Yeah.
And our sessions aren't thin. They are full of people, packed, every single one of them. And so to willfully act, out of volition and say, I'm going to go and participate, that shows, I think, the goodness of the product that we've curated. And so that's what I love. People are willingly to go, to talk, to engage, and then have those follow on.
The programming is fueling the conversations.
It is.
Rather than the programming being an obstacle to the conversations, in which it is, unfortunately, in some.
In a lot of
conferences. So.
Sure.
Dan, thank you so much for being with us here. Is there anything else that you'd like to share in this week before Acton University with the audience? Anything, at this point, it's probably if people are listening to this, if they are now hearing about Acton University for the first time, if what they're hearing is something that they're very interested in, it's probably too late for this year's. What should they be looking to next year? When should they be looking to next year? How else could they get engaged with this year's programming? If they can't be here, we mentioned, we'll be making some of the content available online.
Absolutely.
We have Acton On Demand, which is a great video resource that we upload all the past lectures from these conferences to. What are some other ways that folks can either be ready for next year or enjoy some of the content, at least, of this year's if it's too late for them to attend?
Yeah, absolutely. if you want to just at least see at a glance what we're doing this year, university.acton.org. We'll put that in the show notes. Click on that. You'll be able to see the entire faculty, see who's coming, what lectures they're giving, just if somebody's just curious about what's happening this year. But then be on our mailing list. On that same webpage, there's a contact us. Send us your email and make sure you're receiving because our marketing team does a great job of letting people know when the next, so AU 2026, those application opportunities will go live in usually late October or November, and depending on the week. And so, we're just 6 months away from that opening up, and then really look for our content both in the Acton Line podcast, and then we'll be dripping out some video on Acton On Demand. I think we're recording 7 or 8 lectures this year, special lectures on our main stage, and so people will be able to participate in some of the lectures that way on demand. And so, but university.acton.org will allow people the picture of what we're doing.
Excellent. If you get on that list too, you'll learn about other great programming that we do. Dan will have to revisit sometime to talk about our Towards a Free and Virtuous Society conferences. We do our Acton Lecture Series here in Grand Rapids. There's a lot of great programming that Acton does. And Acton University is a great introduction, though, that gives you a very comprehensive look at all the various things we do. Dan, thank you for all the hard work that you and your team have done putting this together. Special thanks to our emerging leaders who do a tremendous amount of work to make this happen every year, so that everybody can have a great experience.
Yeah, always a pleasure, and even on the podcast to be on this side of the microphone. So thanks, Dan. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Acton or hear more of this podcast, please visit acton.org/podcasts. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.